He's like the perfect combination of Mussolini and Seacrest.
Hello and welcome to the All Good Stories podcast, where we believe all good stories belong to Jesus. And when we look for Jesus in the stories around us, we find him more fully in our own. We're your hosts, Chris Bowden
and Simon Campbell, two millennial dads who love pop culture and making connections from the content we love to the God who loves us.
And in episode 18, we're going to haunt someone, change them into a better person, and then sing about it as we find the good stories in Spirited. All right, Simon Campbell, welcome to the way too early Christmas season.
I don't think it's way too early. Here's the thing. Because we're talking about Spirited, there's enough ghost stuff happening. We're in that season where we've just got done with Halloween. I think there's plenty of room here.
But to be clear, this is absolutely a Christmas movie. But
Okay.
I like the ghost pull
Okay,
you've got
I'm trying to bridge the gap here and just kind of cover my own enthusiasm for just wanting it to be Christmas.
So the question that I've got for you is, are you an early Christmas guy? I think most people kind of hold to the standard of post-Thanksgiving, let's go to town. And then there are some people out there who are like, post-Halloween, it is time. Where do you land here?
I can only hold back my wife so long from Christmas music and Christmas stuff. And so it is totally normal for us to be playing Christmas music after Halloween.
Well, that's good company because I'm a year-round Christmas music person.
Oh no.
I am not ready usually to throw out the Christmas decorations until we get a little closer to Thanksgiving, but I will cheat that probably by a week and be like, all right, we get it. We're not doing Thanksgiving at our house. We're traveling. It's time to change some things up. You and I both, though, also work in the world of ministry. And so for us, that means the Christmas season started like a month ago already. We've been planning and getting
I've been in this for a while. No, we're good.
So we're just going to inundate everyone else in that. But the reason we're doing this is because there are lots of Christmas movies that we think absolutely have an opportunity to point to Jesus in these. And so we want to be able to snag a few of these over the course of the Christmas season. In fact, we are planning to jump into 4 Christmas movies over the course of this holiday season, including... Just kidding. We're not going to tell you.
We're not gonna say it.
You're going to have to wait.
I was like, are you just going to give this away right now? Okay, good.
This is a wait and see. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and maybe you'll find out more.
Yeah, there you go.
Such a terrible plug. But this movie, Spirited, is really not all that old. It's only 2 years old, so this is a newer movie out in the world. And I have found most people have not seen this movie.
Well, it's the bane of Apple TV. It's like if you don't have it, there's nowhere else to find this movie.
So this does exist in the realm of Apple TV Plus, which is still a very niche streaming platform.
Yes.
Now, I would argue it has great content. What is on there is very, very good, but it is just not in the mainstream of people's thought for streaming platforms still years later after they've started. So think of it like renting a movie. If you want to go watch it, it's $10 a month right now. As of this recording, it is $10 a month to go and get Apple TV Plus for a subscription for a month. And then you can check out something else fun like Ted Lasso or Shrinking or Severance. Here's my plug for Apple TV Plus. Take advantage. Go watch this movie.
It sounds like we're hunting for a sponsorship right now is what it sounds like.
Oh, the opportunities are everywhere.
Money, please.
So you could either A, pause this podcast, go watch it right now, and come back. Or Simon, you can give us a rundown and give us a quick synopsis on what Spirited is all about.
All right, here we go. Spirited, starring Ryan Reynolds and Will Ferrell, is a modern musical reshaping of A Christmas Carol, with mesmerizing stage-like scene changes blended with unexpected CGI effects. You won't know what the dickens you're watching. You'd like that.
Can't keep going. Oh, Merry Christmas, everybody.
I brought it all.
That's great.
Good.
Let's go.
The story centers on Clint Briggs, played by Ryan Reynolds. Clint is a slick, self-centered businessman who's deemed unredeemable by the Afterlife's redemption department. Enter the ghost of Christmas Present, Will Ferrell, who's determined to reform Clint himself. But the plot twists when Clint turns the tables on Present, causing him to question if people really change at all. His confidence suddenly ghosting him, Present has to grapple with his own inner turmoil about the certainty of his redeemed status. Filled with humor, catchy musical numbers, and heartfelt moments, Spirited is a festive, comedic twist on the classic holiday story centered on personal transformation and the cost of true redemption.
So again, this movie was released in 2022. So it came out living in the uniquely post-COVID world of cinema. And so this had one of those really weird hybrid releases. It was released in select theaters on November 11th of 2022. And then just 1 week later, it was made available for streaming on Apple TV Plus on November 18th. So it had this like limited early release at the box office that then immediately jumped into streaming because people still weren't going to the movies, had not returned to theaters. And so this was, you could really say, just straight to streaming. This movie made only $14.2 million at the box office, technically. And the weird thing here is that we really don't have a great measurement because none of these companies are releasing their streaming data. They don't want to tell us a thing.
All right, then, keep your secrets.
And so, all that to say, you could argue this movie was relatively underwater because it cost roughly $75 million to make, making it the fourth most expensive Christmas movie of all time. And so, because we don't know the numbers on the streaming services, I would assume that this made money for Apple. But we do have a reference on the reception to this movie. And critics gave this a 70% on Rotten Tomatoes. So it is a certified fresh movie.
Okay.
But you know, just at 70%. You know, it's C's get degrees, Simon. You know, 70% is going to work for us here.
It's true. Okay.
And then the audience score is higher at 80%, coming in, we can say, at a B level here. So all in all, we could say, you know, B minus, C plus movie does have some good reception. I think the number one ding that this movie got from most critics was, you're retelling this and you didn't do like more of a reimagining of this, which to me, I'm like, don't get me started. Don't mess with the classics. And then two, what I think I might affirm is they're saying it was too long. And it shocked me when I sat down to rewatch this going, oh, this is 2.5 hours.
Like,
this is a real musical.
For sure.
All right, Simon, let's start by talking about some movie magic. Something that we just love geeking out over and talking about that we think help make this a good story in general.
This movie really defies a lot of categories that you might try to put it in. Like, yes, it's a musical and has a lot of the touch points of that. But the way that they do transitions and the theatrical treatment of this, it's layered beyond that.
Layered is a really good way to say it. This movie is layered in multiple ways, whether you're talking about its genres, whether you're talking about its storylines, whether you're talking about even the music elements itself through this movie. And so I think that is something that is a strength of this movie. It is very well flushed out because those layers absolutely work. I think the only thing that's tough is you watch this movie and you are taking in a lot. It is a bit of a sensory experience. The storyline is rocketing forward. There's a lot happening in the layers and meta-ness of it all. That this is a busy film. But to your point, it's really good.
A lot of those Ryan Reynolds movies that he's really kind of put his own stamp on this is like kind of waving the tropes in front of you as they do them. You know what I mean? So he's taking like tropes of typical musicals, waving in front of you and then doing it. And for some reason, that's really endearing and kind of disarming of like, oh, I know that they're doing a musical, but they know that they're doing it like a little too hard.
Yeah,
you know?
I'm going to pull this out of the love it or leave it section where I was going to put it and talk about it now. We have yet another movie where Ryan Reynolds is being what feels like Ryan Reynolds. He's kind of niched himself into this lane of you're the self-aware, sarcastic character, right? You're kind of the fighting ahead of the game. I already know where you're going, and I've got this roll my eyes kind of response to everything you could think of because I get it already. I've been there. I've seen it. And he's absolutely bringing this again to this movie. And to your point, it is endearing. It works in those other movies, and it works here too. And that was a piece of movie magic for me, was Ryan Reynolds and Will Ferrell's chemistry here in this movie is actually great, which is wild because you put together two comedy giants right now and also arguably two very divisive comics.
Yeah, I can see
Will
what you're
Ferrell
saying.
is one of those guys, like you kind of either love him or hate him.
Yeah.
Same thing with Ryan Reynolds. Like if you are not in on his like kind of biting, quippy, sarcastic, it can also be easy to get tired of that. And you've got people who also are not Ryan Reynolds fans. And so you've got these two people where either you get them in the room and they might kind of walk over each other, kind of always one up each other, or you just go like, oh my gosh, this is just a lot of energy on screen between the two. Maybe a lot of risk here. but it works magically.
It does really work. And I think the reason that it works is because I actually think that Will Ferrell has a dimension that he brings to comedies where he can get heartfelt. Like he has a heartfelt dimension to him. And the reason I think that Ryan Reynolds brings some magic to this is because how many renditions of Christmas Carol have we seen at this point? So to have somebody like
they even say in the movie, Marley's character is like, yes, and all those other adaptations that nobody asked for.
Yes, we have so many of these adaptations, renditions, and we have a character in Clint Briggs, Ryan Reynolds, who's kind of like cutting through the layers of this and kind of like calling attention to the fact like, oh man, we're going to do this again. Like, oh, this is such a tired story. So I think that the magic of those two, the other dimension, besides the comedic dimension that they both bring some magic to this that makes it work. And that's why I think this movie is going to stand up for a while and become one of those classic favorite comedies that people will watch.
And that draws me right into my last piece of movie magic here is that you really get a behind the scenes of A Christmas Carol. You can imagine this alternate world that exists of all of these spirits, right? Who are making this work as they're like 9 to 5 in the afterlife, right?
Yeah.
Like, how does something like A Christmas Carol happen?
Yeah.
And then this is something they're doing year after year after year.
Yes,
this is not a unique experience for Scrooge.
I mean, that's the intriguing part at the very outset. That's the hook that grabs you is like, oh yeah, do it every year. And I think that the last aspect of this for me is that Charles Dickens, when you read The Christmas Carol, the original story, it's funny and witty and cheeky. One of the first few lines is like, Jacob Marley is dead as a doornail, even though there's nothing particularly dead about a doornail. Right? There's some of this sort of cheeky conversationalist in the midst of the story that I think lost in some of these adaptations of A Christmas Carol because it's such an important story and because it has some serious themes and tones and all these different things, kind of lose some of the original. And so I think that character kind of belongs to this story. So I thought that was a really good addition to this.
What's great about the retelling was that, like, who is a Scrooge of our day going to be? And there's certainly the money aspect of Ryan Reynolds' character of, like, I'm making a ton of money off of being this particular person. But it's through the lens of how's he making money? It's not through, like, accounting or property or mortgages. No, we're going to be divisive. And we're going to run PR, right? And social media. And I was like, oh, you've done it. You have found the modern day monster,
Yes.
That's really good that I appreciated about this retelling. All right, Simon, that movie magic is great, but the real reason why we're here is because we believe that if a story is a good story, there are inevitably going to be elements in this that point back to Jesus, to God, because God is good. And so we have an opportunity as we consume media, movies, TV shows, to say, hey, where do we see Jesus just uniquely on display in this? And how does that help us see God in new ways or equip us or enable us to have spiritual conversations with people as we talk about these things? And so take it away, Simon. What is something that you see that uniquely belongs to Jesus in the movie of Spirited?
Right from the outset of this movie, they talk about how one person can have a ripple effect. And so that's the purpose behind the driving force behind this whole orchestration of ghosts working on a perp throughout the year, getting prepared for this Christmas Eve night. And that's how they choose their perp, is like trying to determine how much ripple effect that person could have if they were redeemed. And so
I love the description that they used to describe when they're at the conference room table. They're like, it's like the wave at a football game.
Yeah.
It's like, that's great.
Yeah. And we see this happen. And this idea that one person's kindness or one person's life or goodness can have a ripple effect. That is something I think that belongs to Jesus, because really we look at the person of Jesus and that is the ultimate ripple effect, because we have God come to earth in person, incarnate, and living among us in his life, his ministry. Though it really only spanned a very brief period of history, has huge ripple effects throughout all history and continues to this day. And we look at the life of his disciples and the apostles and the ministry and the writings that they started. This very fringe movement has become a worldwide, global, multicultural movement of people. And so just from that alone, I think that this is something that belongs to Jesus, that the idea that one person's transformation, that one person could have a ripple effect.
Yeah, you go from Jesus, and then you get to Acts, and you have Stephen, who's the first martyr of the faith, and as a result, people are scattered, and because of Stephen and how he chose to live and die, there's this ripple outward from Jerusalem into the greater known world.
That's a great story to point to, yeah.
Paul, who does it again in his writings, and there's a ripple that goes out as he writes all these letters to all these different places, and just his own influence and travel. And what it made me think of was Matthew 5:16. That was in the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. And so that is just super inspiring to me. It's like going like, hey, when you look at your life, what's your ripple? What's the outflowing of the life that you are living right now? If you could see the ripple effect of what you're dropping in the water day after day, is it spreading a little bit more of Jesus? Is it spreading a little bit more of his love and his compassion in a way that's true and honest and sometimes hard, but like gracious and kind, like all these fruits of the Spirit that have an outpouring of our obedience to Jesus and his forming of us. Yeah. It just, man, I need to live in that and be reminded of that. And it's super inspiring for me.
And we're sort of carrying on these ripples. It's a chain reaction. There's a line in the end of the song, it may be the ending credits song, the Ripples song, where they say, from one man we made a chain reaction. And I think that when we look at that, like that immediately reminded me of Romans 5:15, for if the many died by the trespass of one man, Adam, how much more did God's grace and the gift that came by the grace of one man, Jesus, overflow to the many?
Yes.
Talk about a ripple effect. That is something that belongs to Jesus. This idea that from one man can cause a chain reaction that ripples out and changes the world.
That's so good. I love that. I think something that uniquely belongs to Jesus is this question, can a person really change? It is the first line of the movie. Yeah. And this movie ultimately is arguing, yes. That's the argument this movie's making, land. Right? Yeah. From the beginning, Ryan Reynolds' character, I think I'm just going to keep saying Ryan Reynolds, but Clint Briggs believes that people absolutely cannot. He is absolutely dead set on this, which is why he's an unredeemable here at the start of the movie. That's what's going to get him stuck. And what's interesting is that I absolutely believe people can change and be transformed, and I think anybody can change. But where I might have some agreement here, as someone who believes in Jesus, is that we can do all sorts of behavior modification. We can change our habits. We can find new rhythms. We can learn new practices. All that's great. But I would argue true transformation, life change, moving in a new direction just lies in Jesus alone.
I think you're exactly right, because I think there's a lot of places where this movie kind of brushes up against the possibility or the impossibility of life change. And the answer at the end of it is somewhat unsatisfactory. It doesn't really get to the richness and the depth of it. And it's like, while we talk about like the power of life change, I do think that this movie belongs to Jesus in the sense that if you want to discover true life change, if you want to see things like the scriptural language about a new creation, or clothing yourself in righteousness and living a new life completely, those things are things that really only do belong to Jesus, because we've seen generations upon generations throughout the scripture trying to do this, trying to earn it, trying to, work harder to do it, and can't.
Yeah, and I think what all of us find in our own personal workings of the world, right? I can try to build all the right systems, all the right to-do lists. I can make sure I work out every day. I can make sure I'm doing stuff for God. Like I can make sure I read my Bible every day. I'm going to make sure that I spend some quiet time with God every day. And those are good things. Those are great practices. But if I think that just checking the box on those is going to lead to transformation, I am missing something. God can work and move and all those good things. But if I'm just relying on me checking the boxes, sure, they're going to make me healthier. They're going to make me more organized. They have all these benefits, but it's not going to cause this inward sort of transformation of my soul and my spirit that kind of gets into like the bedrock of my character and who I am. That can ultimately sometimes be like really hard to describe if you haven't experienced that, because it can be like ridiculous and miraculous and almost like a miracle personally. But for every follower of Jesus, they're going to be able to identify something that God has just uniquely and dramatically changed them, where they just say, I just was different, or I just am different.
And some of that can't really be explained.
Simply because I started to believe. Like I just realized all of a sudden something had changed. Something moved in me. And that for me is the kicker. You mentioned it, but 2 Corinthians 5:17, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old is gone. The new is here. There is that sense of like newness and renewal that Christ offers day after day. Like his mercies are made new every morning. In what other world is that offered to you? Every day you wake up and you kind of have to like face the regrets of your past, or like, oh, it's another hard day or whatever. And like God goes, no, my mercies are made new every morning, every day. It is a fresh start. Like, let's go get after it together. I love you. Let's go. And at the same time, I think we also like have to like caution ourselves when we get caught up in all sorts of other ways that we want to define success or transformation or getting better or self-improvement or whatever. Yeah. And if we're starting to do things on our own apart from God, like it's just not going to have that same transformational power.
And I think connected to that, really, the final song that Ryan Reynolds and the whole cast jump in on is like this: do a little good, give a little more, work a little harder than you did the day before. That's the answer that they land on. But the whole wrestle of the Ghost of Christmas Presents character in Will Ferrell is wrestling with this idea that, can he really be sure? That answer might feel good, but deep down, you know it really isn't good enough.
Could I ever really do enough, right? Could I possibly ever write out all the red that is in my ledger, right?
Yes.
And we would both look at each other and go like, no,
you
and
can't. Clint, I love the dialogue, what Clint is doing to try to get Present to question his whole situation here. He's like, it doesn't matter how much good you do, you still don't know the answer to the question. Am I forever unredeemable? Will Ferrell is singing, all the worth I thought I earned turned worthless in the end. There's so much of this that I like this movie because it just kind of really lays out the typical moral conundrum that we all think of, like, okay, when I die, I'm measured by my good and bad. And, this movie gives us kind of a fun way to explore the idea of how could I work my way back to get myself a retirement package, a second chance at life, right?
Or the insecurity deep down of like, even if you've done all this good, you're still going to hold on to this fear nagging in you somewhere that it is still not enough. Right? Yeah. And Jesus enters stage right. To quote Bluey, Dad enters the room.
Dad enters.
And saying, like in Ephesians 1:7, saying, in him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of our trespasses according to the riches of his grace. What a reassuring statement.
Yes.
We have redemption. Or Colossians 1:13 through 14. He's delivered us from the domain of darkness and has transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. And I go, deep breath. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, for sure. When you hear a character like Will Ferrell's character singing, am I forever unredeemable? It just like the answer to that question, the answer to that wrestle of like, have I done enough, is really answered in Ephesians when it says, for it is by grace that you have been saved through faith. Yeah. And this is not by yourselves. It is a gift from God, not by works, so that no one can boast, because we know that doing good is a part of this equation. We just don't know how. And Jesus is the missing part. And that's where it belongs to Jesus, because that's the answer to his wrestling. That's the answer to his questioning. The answer is you can't. It's only by faith in Jesus, this gift of God of forgiveness, that you have a shot at being redeemed. And here's where the good works comes in. It's at the tail end of that passage. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Yes, we are saved by grace through faith. And then after that transformation happens, after we have become redeemed, that's when we can live into those good works that God has prepared for us.
It's this order of operations, right?
Yeah.
And it's often so easy to get confused, where it's like, I'm going to do good to get to Jesus. And it's like, no. You're going to meet Jesus. And then the outflow of you living in the reality of how much Jesus loves you allows you to then go and love your neighbor and do these good things out of the motivation of someone who has loved you more than anyone else. And none of us are perfect or going to get this perfectly right. It is easy to get caught in making it a to-do list faith. It is easy to see myself as unredeemed again. It is easy for me to see myself as having fallen short, because the tension is that's still true. I'm still falling short.
Every time you do mess up, that nagging in the back of our minds, enough to question, like, if I can still mess up and fall short, have I really been redeemed? And man, there's rich conversations that are on the table here when you watch a movie like this, when you engage with the themes of the Christmas Carol. There's some rich stuff here.
Another thing that I think uniquely belongs to Jesus is asking the question, what are the essentials? One of my favorite songs out of this whole movie is when Ryan Reynolds is singing about Christmas trees. He has his opening musical number about creating outrage, right? About
Yes.
trees. And he's essentially arguing that it's a culture war. It's about the trees, but it's not really about the trees. It's not enough for folks to love you. They have to hate your rivals
That is a great
more.
quote.
Yeah, you're going to prove those Christmas killers wrong. Like, you just start throwing those catchy, pithy things out there, and that stuff sticks. And I think what that drives for me is that not everything that we're encountering in this world is a cultural war or cultural issue that we need to dive into all of the time. Sometimes you have to go like, hey, what are the essentials of our faith?
Right.
One of those that I dive in with immediately is Jesus' Sermon on the Mount saying, love your enemies. What's essential? Jesus' most important sermon. It's saying, you have heard that it was said to you, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. And I'm just like, there it is.
Isn't that the perfect like antithesis to this idea that he's talking about? Like, that's so great.
Because I think it is so easy. And I think there's an enemy in our world that loves to distract us with all of these other issues. I'm not saying they don't matter, right? But I'm not saying they're as important as some of these other things. It is most important for me to love God and to love my neighbor. That is what God has said is most important, which means these other things are less important.
And I think because we are designed and when we crave unity, and that's one of the deepest desires that God has for us, it shouldn't be a surprise to us that the adage that Ryan Reynolds is singing about is true, because controversy will cause a response. It will cause engagement. It will cause sales to rise, or whatever, people to take a stand. But the thing is like, we only do that because we crave unity, because we crave togetherness on something.
Good picture, man. And what a timepiece that song is going to be for us in the future.
I know.
Right? Every Facebook-loving boomer wants to fight a culture war.
I know.
So tell your core consumer what they're fighting for, right? He just kind of drills right into the crux of what all of these like marketing companies and PR firms are getting after, going like, let's drive division, let's drive these cultural things to trigger people into just to sell our products, right? And I'm going, what are we going to learn in the future, or how are these platforms going to adapt or not, or lean in, and how are we going to change as a people to either combat that or grow into that or grow out of that? And it will be amazing to look back even 10 years from now and say, that song doesn't make sense anymore.
And to your point, perfect modern day Scrooge. Like, we're not going to love Christmas. We're just going to create controversy so that we sell more Christmas trees. One of the other moments that I think totally belongs to Jesus in this movie comes at the very end, where we see Clint's critical moment where he jumps in front of the bus in the place of present. And we see that as like the proof that he has changed, that he would set somebody else's needs before his own. And that is a place that absolutely belongs to Jesus. But because of this one line, because they have this great song at the end, and then the scene unpauses and he gets smacked by the bus and he dies. And
we talk about pulling the rug out from under you in the movie, right?
It was very good.
I was like, I still was shocked watching it a second. I'm like, that actually went there. Wow.
It was great.
That takes guts. Good play.
But there's one line that I think makes it for me. Jacob Marley walks up to him and he's like, wait, no. I wasn't, are you kidding me? I'm dead right now. And he says, well, your sacrifice would have no meaning if there was no consequence. And that is something that belongs to Jesus, because the reality is that our sin demands a sacrifice, and that sacrifice has to have consequence. And the beauty of the gospel is that Jesus came, paid that sacrifice, got hit by the bus of all of our sin, all of our shame, took that punishment of eternal separation from God and took it even though he did not deserve it. And because of that, because his sacrifice had such a consequence, we can be spared from that. And Clint says, like, okay, I get it, but this ending sucks.
Yes.
And if you read the end of the Gospels and you're reading the story of Jesus and this peace-loving minister, prophet of God, being crucified on the cross in the most brutal way possible, and watching his disciples just despair because they had no concept, no reference for this. But this is not the end. And that's what we hear Clint's sister say as she emerges from the light. We see this really beautiful, rich place where the sacrifice has meaning because it has consequence, and it's not the end. Jesus rose from the dead. He redeemed us, gives us a place by his side, and gives us the ability to be called sons and daughters, to inherit the kingdom of heaven, to live with him forever, because greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. And that's what we see represented in this movie at the end of Spirited. And that's what we see in the story of Jesus.
Something I saw in here that I think belongs to Jesus as well is in our own personal journey with Jesus, we can be right on the edge of taking the right step and still not take it. Or we know what the right step is and we're still not going to take it. And we see this really clearly with Kimberly's character in the movie. In her song that she gets towards the beginning of the movie is, words are easy to say, but it looks like walking away is a little bit harder to do. That's the view from here. How often is that the life we're living with Jesus sometimes? Where it's, I know what that step is, and I kind of can see the risks or the cost of that. And it can be very easy to find all sorts of justifications and find all sorts of reasons as to why we don't have to, or we shouldn't, or it would be unwise, or it would be risky. We can just kind of talk our way out of that.
Yeah.
But
and
even
before Clint's big moment, he's like, I'm really good at rationalizing this. I'll feel bad about it for a couple weeks, but like, I'll get over it.
The crux of the movie, right? He's like, I'm still just going to go back to doing what I was doing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And how easy is that for us, you know? And so I was thinking of James 2:17 in the same way. Faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. And I just go, oh, okay. I can have faith, but is that faith causing me to step obediently where God is asking me to go? Right? It's like, if you truly trust me, you may be uncomfortable, but you're going to trust that I'm going to be there for you. You're going to trust that I'll be there to catch you if something drops, if something falls. And I just have to admit myself that like sometimes I will absolutely shirk away from the edge and have to go like, oh, sorry, Jesus, I didn't trust you there in the way that I should have. Or I doubted that you were going to catch me. And that is hard to admit because it's so easy for me to justify with what's right in front of my face.
We hear the words unredeemable over and over and over again through this movie. And the claim that the movie makes is that no one is unredeemable. And I think that belongs to Jesus. There's a line Ryan Reynolds sings, you can be a cynic and a sinner who can only see the flaws, but even if you've lost your way, you don't have to stay a lost cause. And I think that there's nothing more true in terms of what the gospel says about that, because you're never so far gone. You're never so far away that Jesus can't reach you there, can't redeem you there. And there's a lot of places throughout the movie where the weight of feeling unredeemable is so palpable. Present says to Clint, I know the weight you carry, and I know that it's unbearable. But here's the good news, right? Jesus can save whoever he wants to, whether it's a criminal on the cross, whether it is a leading religious teacher of the time. You might be asking yourself some of the lines from this very movie. Is all I am unlovable? Am I someone can forgive? Can I take the leap and live? And that's the question. What Jesus has done is he's laid it all out. He's paid the sacrifice. He's made a way for us. And Jesus is asking you, are you going to take the leap and live? Are you going to place your faith in me? Are you going to trust in me? And Jesus is just waiting for you to say yes. Jesus is just waiting for you to reverse all of those things and say, you are lovable. I see good in you. You are someone I can forgive, instead of being and feeling and living in this world of thinking you're unredeemable. You can meet your Redeemer.
And now it's time for some Love It or Leave It, an opportunity for us to talk about what we loved and what we could have done without along the way.
Let's do it.
And the first one right off the bat for me is the idea of this Hall of the Redeemed, Simon, and specifically Love It or Leave It as they pan across the room. We get a specific call out for Dolly Parton, who is in the Hall of the Redeemed.
I love that. Dolly Parton is great. She's just a gem.
That's right. She is a saint. She is one of the most generous,
She is
philanthropic people. Like, what an encouraging person she has been over the decades. And so
Yep.
the fact that you would then like
Yes.
put her in here as someone who like started off terrible and then has been
Okay.
redeemed, that was just such
Yeah.
a good like
I love
inside
that.
baseball kind of thing.
I
Like, that was
definitely
great.
love that. I'll turn that around on you too. So the first perp that we see being redeemed is a Karen. Love it or leave it.
Yeah, her name's actually Karen.
Karen.
I thought that was great. I thought that was such a good play because they don't make like a big deal out of it and you don't find out right away. They like just say it later. They just like use her name in conversation.
Yes.
And if you catch it, you're like, oh, she's a Karen. Nice.
Yeah, she's a Karen.
It's like literally. It's
it's
so
great.
good. That is an absolute love it for me. Another love it or leave it for me is
Mhm.
connected to that very same scene with Karen and later on in the movie too. But
Uh-huh.
love it or leave it, this parade of characters that come in when they like prove they've been redeemed. Like this music kicks in, this
Yeah.
fanfare, and all these characters walk out.
I love it because I think it's over the top. It's wonderful, and like all the characters come out. It's like, it's kind of like the curtain call at the end of a
Yeah.
musical. Like, oh yeah, here's the production we did. Here's everybody. I think it works.
Yeah, I'm going the opposite direction here. That's an absolute
Oh
leave it
come on,
for me.
why?
That is a leave it. And the reason why is because Karen, who's been on this adventure,
Yeah.
has no idea who all these other people and things are, right? For her and her experience in a traditional haunting, she would have
She-
seen
she
none of the
got
behind the scenes
None
stuff,
of the behinds,
right?
Yeah,
She has no
okay.
idea. Like,
Well,
what's all this? And
I
it
know,
kind of
but-
like undoes what they did in a
No.
certain sense because you're exposing all of this kind of like system administrative side that kind of takes the magic out of the experience that she's had. And I would go even further here
But I'm not done yet.
to say that
Mm.
you're not setting all of this up to then have like a test to check the box at the end in like the first moment you come out of the experience, right? Like that is not the point. The point is that you're going to continue to go out and live like a transformed life and like, oh, you passed the check by checking the box because you wanted to play ball out in the street, like, oh, you did it. Yeah, good job. I'm like, that is way too simplistic, way too easy. Like that is ridiculous. It's like, oh, all this was a test and you passed the test. And I'm like, no, that is not what this is about.
Wow.
I disagree. I liked it because I think that it solidifies the concept that these ghost characters are all working behind the scenes, and then they get to celebrate with the perp for a moment, and then she goes back into her life, right? I don't have an issue with that. The one thing I do have an issue with is why Chili? Why
What?
are they celebrating with both times that this happens? They're like, Chili! And they're going, and he's eating, like when he's looking at him at the end, when he's looking at Ryan Reynolds in the truck bed, he's eating a bowl of chili. Why this
One of
needs
those,
to be celebratory
inside jokes
chili?
they're slipping in there.
I know, it's just dumb. That's dumb.
It's dumb.
So I will say
Yeah.
that part's dumb, but I do like the parade at the end. I'm a
Okay.
fan.
I'm just telling you, one of my favorite parts about Christmas Carol is that like Scrooge wakes up and he has to make a decision for himself that this is the way I'm going to live.
Like
and it's
whether
his
it was real or not.
responsibility, right? Whether it was real or not, he has made a decision, and then no one's coming around to say, "Good job, way to go." It's like this is just who I am.
But this
now.
is not a Christmas Carol purist question because the whole thing got thrown out the window in the first 30 seconds of the movie anyway. So
That's true.
this is not like a modern retelling. We have plenty of those. Like this is something different. So embrace the different.
Not this part. The rest is fine.
Okay. Okay. Love it or leave it. They sidestep the classic trope in musicals. I didn't notice this at first, but my wife nudged me and she just said they skipped the third song. So like the third song in a musical is like typically like this pivotal moment of realization for the character. And they have a significant like emotional thing.
Huh.
And the third song is the one that Jacob Marley said, no, stop. You can have your perp. And it's just
yeah.
the whole
It's like,
purpose
oh, thank
of
you.
the-
How
yeah.
reasonable.
Yeah. She's like, oh, I don't have to sing that song. And then
part of the
and
movie magic
yes.
of that is because they had to cut that song for time.
Yes.
Yeah, and then they
That's
kept
what I'm
it in
saying.
the credits.
So they cut the third song. I
Yeah,
thought it was
okay,
great.
I get it. It took me a long time to catch up with you there, man. Yeah, my bad. Love it or leave it. Good afternoon as a swear word.
I love it. I love it so much because I remember this scene when the people are coming around to collect for the poor in the real Christmas Carol
Yes.
story. They come to Scrooge's office and they're asking for collections from the poor. And the way to get rid of them is just saying, good afternoon. I said good afternoon, like
Yes.
dismissing them.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Yeah. Just like equating that to like a modern cuss word is just great. Yeah.
For any audience, it's funny on its own to go
Yes.
like, of course, culture and language changes all the time. Like,
Yes.
sure, that was a swear
Yeah.
word, right? Why not?
Right. Sure.
But then if you've read The Christmas Carol, and
Yeah.
the original story,
Yeah.
you go like, oh, very clever. Like,
Yeah,
that's,
very
that's
clever.
a great tie from that conversation.
It reminds me of like the Monty Python saying "ni," like the outrage over like a simple statement.
Oh yeah,
How dare
what's the
you
pull
say
there?
"ni" to an old lady? The knights who say "ni." Come on, man.
Oh, I thought you were saying that knee was like a reference from something else
It's
as
not
well.
a reference for something else, but just the reaction that everybody gives to
That
somebody saying something
visceral
totally
response.
like like,
Are you saying niece to that old woman?
Yes.
Oh, what sad times are these when passing ruffians can say "ni" at will to old ladies.
how dare you say good afternoon to a young to a child like that? Like
There's a baby. There's a baby.
exactly.
Simon, love it or leave it. Tracy Morgan as the ghost of Christmas Yet to Come.
I really want to know what you think about this too, but I love it because I think that it's such an unexpected casting there.
Mm-hmm.
And when he finally breaks through and speaks at the end, like, in his classic Tracy Morgan, you've been Christmas caroled, and throws him into the grave. Like, this is great. It's too good. It's too good.
Yeah, I would agree. That was a love it for me. I have a bias towards like always loving Tracy Morgan because he's just Tracy Morgan and everything
exactly.
he
Everything.
does. He can't just help but just be himself.
Mm-mm.
And so for the fact of like it is not the ghost of Christmas Yet to Come. It's Tracy Morgan.
It's Tracy Morgan
in the outfit, right?
And it's like
and that's what sells it for me.
It brings enough levity that they can still have the scary character, but it's like, oh, that's Tracy Morgan.
Yeah,
Like,
and
that's hilarious.
I love how they play off like that character in general. There's so many moments throughout the movie. If you look in the background, like he'll point at something or like point something out.
Yeah.
Like when Kimberly and Present have their moment where they like touch hands for the first time. Like they touch. You see him in the background, and he just points at the hands. He just points at them holding hands. Like, look at that.
Like this is
Like,
this
you
is
see
my
that
only,
happening right now?
This is my only job. I just point. Yeah, it's great.
And so I thought that was just such a good. The fact that he's having a crisis of faith of like, I want to do more. I can bring more than this.
Yes, and that's so funny because it's sort of playing off of the things that we've seen in every adaptation of this, like just the bony pointed finger. Like it made it funny. Like,
Right.
and that I think that's the magic of this, and I loved it. Love it or leave it, Clint's brother's wig.
He has a wig?
What do you mean? Come on. Look, just the character. That is absolutely 100% a wig.
Oh, wow. That hadn't even crossed my mind that could be a wig. Okay. This is a very interesting question for me. I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm very much disappointing
okay.
you
We don't
in
need to
this
do
moment.
We don't need to do this one.
I didn't even notice it.
So my wife and I, when we were watching this movie, had an entire sidebar conversation about the poor quality of wigs in this movie. Like it's and it's the combo. It's the stocking cap and then the bad wig combo, and they did it to multiple characters, including his sister. Both his sister and brother at different points had this like wig and stocking.
Yeah,
hat
I could have noticed
combination.
with his sister in general, like her.
I mean, you can
hairpiece
notice it
was a little
really easily when they're on the skating rink and he's like flopping around and stuff, and it's like this is terrible. Like, I mean, they went to so much other effort in so many other areas
I feel
of the
like
movie.
I need to call
Like,
you out.
why?
Like you called me out a few episodes ago of going like, what is this music appreciation class? I'm like, what is this beautician
I
school?
know, I don't
like what is happening right now?
I'm just saying, like, the reason that I needed to ask you about this is because in our viewing of it, at entirely derailed part of the movie, we paused and had to talk about it
Now
because
it
was
will
just
derail me for the rest of time. Thank you for burdening all of us with this information.
Love it or leave it when Will Ferrell says to somebody at the Christmas party, "You look stupid," to somebody in Buddy the Elf costume.
Yes,
that was another one for me.
That's great. That's a love it. Where I'm like, oh, that's magic.
It was
that's meta magic.
Yes, and I'm like, thank you, whoever thought of not wasting that opportunity of like having like a work Christmas party that's costume, and then giving Will Ferrell the chance to make fun of somebody in his iconic outfit. It's great. Love it or leave it. There's this scene in the elevator where Ryan Reynolds and Will Ferrell are going up to the party or whatever, and he's talking about his past as Scrooge and his kicker moment with Tiny Tim. But Will Ferrell's character can't remember the name of that little boy.
Little Larry, I think it was.
Yeah. I'm gonna run down all of the iterations.
Please do.
Options that he gives. So love it or leave it. Little Larry,
Love it.
Micro Michael,
Yeah, it's a love it.
Super Small Steve,
Love it.
Teensy Tim,
Love it. I'm gonna say love it.
Itsy Witsy Isaac.
They're all love it. They're all great. The fact that they're all back to back to back, and you have Ryan Reynolds be like, no,
I had to go back
no,
because I couldn't catch them all, and I was like, oh, I got to put on subtitles for this. I got it, and he gets out Itsy Witsy Isaac as they're walking out of the elevator.
Oh, it's like the cutaway, pull away line.
It's so, like you almost
blink and miss it. Yeah.
Itsy
that
Witsy
is
Isaac.
Itsy Bitsy Isaac. That's the killer. That one's great.
This last love it or leave it for me is very specific. Love it or leave it. There's a poster in that homeless shelter scene. And I was like, what does that say? It says, the joy of Christmas lies in the gathering of the past and the future to celebrate the present.
Look at them paying attention to their environment. That's so great. Wow. That's love it. That's super fun.
It's a great quote. I Googled it just to see who has that quote. And I can't find an attribution anywhere. So it's like, whoa, that's a good quote.
That's really great. Oh, that's a love it. I love when movies are willing to go like, yeah, let's throw that up on the wall. That'll be fun.
Yeah, just bury that in there.
Well, Simon, all good things must come to an end, including this episode.
Thanks again for joining us for episode 18. We hope that's been a fun one for you, but our greatest desire is that this is doing for you what it's doing for us, shaping the way we watch movies and sparking spiritual conversations around them.
And as always, we would love to keep the conversation going with you because there's all sorts of other good stories and awesome nuances to explore, and you can track us down to talk about your thoughts, insights, questions, and favorite Christmas movies on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok at All Good Stories Podcast. We'd love to keep the conversation going and keep learning from you.
And remember, all good stories belong to Jesus.
And if you choose to give your story to Jesus, you can be sure He'll make it a good one.